The little countdown button's not working. That's okay. Welcome everybody to our session today. Ask a Low-Code Developer. First webinar housekeeping is on the screen here. If you have any questions, you can also email DevDays. I'll put it in the chat. But Chrome is recommended. If you are having issues, try reconnecting with Chrome. Today we're speaking with Ashley Moose, a principal business analyst from Tennessee, 16 years with Blackbaud. We have Glenn Hudson, a principal solution architect from Texas, and Robert Frank, a business consultant from the UK, who has also been here for 16 years. At the end of today's session, I'm going to submit a survey, so please fill out this survey, and I will turn it over to the team.
Thank you. So again, this session is basically your time. I went through our various different sessions throughout in the past 2 days. There have been questions that have been coming up that are best for this forum. So this forum is more of a Q&A type area. If there are questions you have in regards to how does this work, or maybe you heard something that happened that was mentioned in a previous conversation that you're like, what does that mean? Then that's basically this is basically an open Q&A time. This is your if you've got questions. I know a few have had those in my sessions, and I said maybe this Ask a Low-Code Developer session may be the best thing. So this is your time. So if you've got any questions, certainly let us know. J.R. Barden has Susan Walters has a question. When will we be forced to use the new designer? That's a Microsoft thing. I don't think they've announced when the new designer will be the designer. We haven't gotten that type of information yet from Microsoft as far as when that's going to be for real.
And I'm seeing a question here as well in the Q&A from Tilga Anderson. All my flows and automations are run through my personal work accounts. Would you recommend setting up service accounts? Yes, absolutely. Just so if you do happen to leave your organization, having things either shared with a service account or owned by the service account, the others would have access to. It's just going to help prevent anything from getting lost if you are, leave the organization or may just not be available, go on vacation, something like that. So having either flows owned by the service account or at least shared with one is definitely recommended.
I also see a question about how is a good way to get started. For those of you that are brand new, I am putting a link in the list, a link in the chat. That is one of the many ways to get started. So we've got Microsoft has its own different getting started areas. We have our own getting started area as well in regards to if I'm doing this for the first time. We've also had a number of sessions the past few days as well. So if you haven't had a chance to view those, certainly take a look there as well. But yeah, one of the links I just posted in, and I'll post, I know the chat's going pretty quickly. I'll go and post that just in case you didn't have a chance to grab it. I posted it there.
Also seeing here from Marcy, as someone brand new to this, is there a document that outlines what each field is in each connector? Yes, there is a Microsoft documentation, and there is our Sky API resources. So I would say start with the Microsoft documentation, because that is going to be specific to the different connectors. Whereas the fields that are in a connector, if you're looking at like the Sky API resources, there may be additional Sky API endpoints that are not in a connector. So definitely start with that connector documentation, and then dive in a little bit deeper and look at the corresponding endpoint through the Sky API documentation as well. And Haley, I'm seeing a question. I'd love to hear more about what Ashley shared regarding the Ask Query feature. So this is it. Kind of think of how to jump in here. So I did a presentation yesterday on some tips and tricks in the Query API. And one of the features that I highlighted a little bit was using ask operators within queries. So this is a little bit of a newer feature to the Query API. It wasn't one of the, originally when Query was first rolled out, you couldn't use queries that had an ask operator in there, but now you can. So what this can allow for is some uses of query within Power Automate flows that are a little bit more dynamic, or whenever your criteria is going to be like you need to filter on is different based off of whatever record that query might be based on. So you can dynamically pass in that criteria by having it set to use an ask operator. If you have other specific questions, I would love to get some, if you or others, maybe we can do a little bit more of a deep dive into that, into a Power Automate user group session, because that way we can be a little bit more interactive. And I do think it's something that it's a little confusing to just talk about without having like a screen share and being able to get into a little bit more of that kind of detail. All right, I will let Eric know that we want to talk about ask operators and our next user group. Cara, see a question, what's a good way to get started if you are a beginner? If you're a beginner, there's a lot of resources available currently through the developer portal, specifically going into the Microsoft Power Platform documentation section. There are training resources and links there, some tutorials that'll walk you through kind of like more Blackbaud focused examples. So I would say start there. There's a lot of information, so it might be slightly overwhelming, but just kind of work through it. There's some really good like self-guided or step-by-step guided tutorials that will kind of set you up and walk you through building your first flow, show you kind of what to expect with the outcome. So that's, to me, the best place to start. And then to start coming to the Power Automate user groups as well. So if you haven't already signed up for that and aren't coming, definitely would recommend that. So I will find a couple links to both of those and stick those into the chat too.
I see one question from Aaron Shapiro. Can you talk about the different use cases for the Query API versus the Query Connector in Power Automate? One thing to keep in mind is that a connector in Power Automate is a wrapper for a corresponding API. So when you talk about Query API and Query Connector, you're almost seeing that talking about the same thing. Working directly with the Query API is a bit more complicated, even if you use one of our, like a send an HTTP request kind of generic one. But then like I said about the Query Connector, it means you can ignore a lot of the API stuff and just focus on the on the task at hand. So the benefit, if you're a pro coder, then you just want to do stuff exactly the way you want to, then the Query API directly is certainly one way of doing it. But then, using the Power Platform connector, it's still using the API behind the scenes, but making it a bit easier to work with. So again, it's what more of like what your focus is and what your level of coding is.
Okay. Let's see what else we got in the QA here. Maybe answer here's Cara.
I see a question. We get this question come up often from Julie Salzman. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Do you need to use the Microsoft on-premise gateway for using Microsoft Power BI? That is definitely one way of gathering the data from the API in order to pull it within Power BI. However, there's a number of different ways that people get the data out of Razor's Edge. The most common way nowadays, or that a lot of people are adopting, is using that query API connector. We've got some other things in the pipeline as well. Our regional workshops, I think we've got one in Chicago and one in Houston left this year, and it might have been touched on briefly during Blackbaud Developers Conference, talks about just how to use the query connector to pull that information out of Razor's Edge, Financial Edge, or what have you, maybe stick it in a OneDrive or a SharePoint or a Google Docs area, and then to be able to pull into your Power BI. So the gateway is certainly one way of doing it, but there are definitely a number of different options to get that data out of your Blackbaud solution and pulling that into Power BI.
Okay. Adam, looks like I found somewhere in the docs that RENXT limited the SSH SFTP polling for the FTP folder, but it was not clear on what that limit is. In my basic Power Automate flow to get files from the FTP folder out of RE, pulls the FTP folder, and I'd rather not hit the limit. That is a good question. So I know that came out about a couple years ago now, and I don't remember what the exact limit was, but I want to say it was maybe like a 10 called every 10 minutes or a call a minute, something of that nature. Just basically because what was happening when there were issues, there was any kind of issue connecting to the FTP folder, we were just having calls go out in like nonstop, and it was making everything crash. So that's not something so much that you should really be concerned with, unless by chance, you are setting up a flow and your credentials expire. You're going to hit that limit in order to prevent your flow from failing or from having other downstream effects. But it's not a limit that you should worry about needing to account for within the Power Automate flow directly. Sorry, that's a bit of a roundabout answer there, but ultimately the limit isn't something you need to worry about. It's really just more there for to make sure things don't break. And Jen, when I have copied flows, imported templates, I have noticed some have a variable for the environment ID. I know where to get the info for it. I used it in one flow where I got the ID from my test sandbox database that pulled the query from my sandbox environment, but updated the prod environment. I did create a separate environment in Power Automate for my sandbox, but haven't finished that flow at this time. So I don't know if there's what the question is there. Jen, if you can add some additional feedback or clarity. But it sounds like what you're doing is the right way to approach things. So if you have a test Power Automate or a test NXT environment that you have access to, Instead of having or connecting one Power Automate environment to both your production and your test environment, it is a great idea to create a separate environment in Power Automate. So you can have one Power Automate connected to your production environment and one Power Automate environment connected to the test environment. So that way it just makes it a little bit easier to keep up with those connections.
A couple of questions I've gotten very similar things too, so I want to go ahead and just share my screen real quick. I've seen this question come up a couple of times. I'm in my flow for Power Automate. Need just a second for it to load. And let me make the screen a bit bigger. Maybe not. There we go. And many of these different sounds. Sorry, yes, so choked up about automation. When you've got a number of these list actions in Power Automate, so for example here, list funds. Sometimes I may need to actually show, I'm in the new view, advanced parameters, and there's this box here that says limit, represents the number of records to return. By default, if you don't put anything here, it's 500. The maximum is 5,000. So if you're working with lists of things that have more than 500 records in them, go through and take a look here at the limit, and you may want to update this limit here. Again, sometimes it may not be obvious. Again, I'm just using list funds as an example, and it may not always show up when you first open up the action. You have to click on the show advanced parameters or show all, and there'll be a limit here. Again, in most actions, the default is 500 at a time, but if you know you've got more, you're going to be having more than 500 records, so you can go ahead and increase that limit. Again, the maximum is 5,000 here. So again, I've seen a couple different questions that kind of lead to the same area. Hey, I'm not getting all my records, I'm not getting enough, or what have you. That may be one of the things to start taking a look at, is that limit option there to see, okay, let me increase the number of records I'm getting at one time.
Edward Leiter, looks like you're having an issue using the FENXT accounts payable connector and may have encountered a bug. But working with support, they have informed you that they do not support the Power Platform. So that is right. The support does not support the Power Platform. If you've encountered something that you think is a bug, definitely post it out into the community. That's something, I keep an eye on it daily. Eric Lieber, who kind of be our true go-between if there were any bugs, I know he keeps an eye on it. So if you don't already have a community post out there, and this is just good advice for anyone too, if you were to encounter something that is a bug or potential bug within the connector, put that out into the community. Feel free to tag me, and we can help, track down and follow that through to what the issue might be. And yeah, just saw Megan's question, and I think Christopher, you're jumping into the same question in chat there. There are a lot of connectors in Power Automate for Blackbaud. Is there a reference on which connectors to use for different case types? And, unfortunately, there's not really, because it's going to depend on what you're doing. They are separated for the most part into different kind of functional areas. So if I'm doing something, I need to create a daily gift notification, I'm working with my gifts connector. If I need to send out or gather information about my constituents, I'm working with the constituents connector. But if you are doing something like sending out acknowledgments, you very well may be working with both the gift connector and the constituents connector because you're pulling that list of gifts that need to be acknowledged. But then you're also pulling out data from the constituent side, perhaps things like their address, email address, addressing and salutation. So it just depends. And unfortunately, I have not found a good way to always, know exactly where everything is. Sometimes it does just take a little bit of searching because you're looking for something and you're like, is this going to be in maybe the prospects connector or is this going to be in fundraising? And sometimes you do just have to search around a little bit and just get familiar with where the different actions or endpoints are based off of those different groups. So I would say start with thinking of what your kind of functional area use case is, and most likely what you need is going to be within that connector.
A couple other questions that may not be necessarily calling individual people out, but kind of a theme that I've seen come through both in the Q&A and chat. One of which is that, hey, I want to test working with Power Automate, but I want to touch my live data. Sometimes people refer to things as a good, better, or best. I call it a meh, better, and best. The meh version is you go through and you create your own test records within your live database, a test campaign, fund and appeal, constituent, or whatever. The good news is minimal setup. The bad news is that means you have to go through and actually work with all your different reporting to make sure many of those are, those test records are excluded out of the system or out of those reports. The better version, I'm putting a link, a KB article link here, is what we call our Sky Developer cohort. And what this is a KB article on that. What this is that we actually have public sandboxes for everything from Razor's Edge to Financial Edge to grant making, anything that has Sky API, Blackbaud CRM, all true. That if you, it tells you how to, that KB article talks about what's available and how to access it. It's a little bit limited. You don't have supervisor rights, but it allows you to go through and test your APIs, your Power Platform, your connectors. Those of you that have been in our regional workshops or our pre-BBCon sessions, you may already have access to those. The good news about that is that if you blow something up or if you delete something, it's not your live data. The bad news is that you can just search the KB for cohort. If you search KB for cohort, you'll find it. I don't think we can pin too many things without the other chat getting lost in, lost in the stuff. So the good news is that it's just test data. The thing to consider is that we've got like thousands of people in it, working all the time. Which kind of speaks to the stability of Razor's Edge NXT, especially in our other solutions. We got thousands of developers working at the same time. It is not your data. Sometimes when you do queries or results, you see some random data that doesn't make any sense because people are just putting in some random data. So that's the better. The best version is that if you want to test, if you want to test data, if you want to test it with your data, then contact your account executive because there are ways to get sandboxes or test environments specifically with your data. It is an additional subscription fee in addition to your Razor's Edge or Financial Edge subscription. But what allows you to do is to copy over your live data. You can refresh it once a month. And then it allows you to say, okay, I've got my campaign fund and appeal structure. I've got records that I recognize. I've got code tables the way I recognize it and what have you. So again, that is the best option, and I'm putting best in quotation marks because you're working with your data. You can test stuff out. How's it going to work with my data? Again, the cohort environment is something that is free to use, but again, it's not your data structure. It's not your constituents that you're used to or what have you. And then again, the not so good option is if you want to create some test records. Again, I use that as a last resort because you could, no matter how many berries you put on, you can have some mistakes or maybe reports start coming out odd or what have you. The replicated data for testing is you would open up a case with support. If you already have a test environment, then support, opening up a case with support will be able to refresh that again. You got once a month.
And Sunshine, I saw a question from you as well in here about while the skills labs are great, it would be nice to have more training on the background why behind building in Power Automate and Power BI. I would say definitely recommend going just through the standard Microsoft Learn training courses. That will provide a lot of good detail there. I actually started when I first was learning Power Automate, going to the Microsoft Learn training classes. Make sure if you are looking at that though, you're focusing on nothing that is related to Power Automate desktop because some of those do get a little bit intermingled. So that's a good resource. I'm going to put something into the chat here as another Power Automate resource that I personally find to be a useful tool. I like the way he kind of explains things. And yes, and Blackbaud University does also have some Power Automate learning classes as well. So if you have not already taken those, would definitely recommend checking those out. And as for Power BI, I don't know if there's any other kind of similar places for, that's not Microsoft or Blackbaud affiliated that are good Power BI resources. But I will ask Rebecca Sundquist, and if so, maybe have her share in the next Power BI user group.
I already put the answer to this in chat, but I'll say it out loud. Questions about what decision points are made as far as when something shows up at a connector or what have you. Again, this goes back to the fact that connectors are based on the APIs. So if something's not available in the API, we can't put it in the connector. And even when something is available in the API, then we have to get the connector recertified, and it's a lengthy process with Microsoft. So sometimes we wait until a number of new things have hit the API before submitting it for things for re-inclusion into into the certified connector. Again, we have the generic connector that we call the send an HTTP request that can help in the meantime. But as far as what determines when something shows up in the connector, first it has to be available in the API. And then once we have enough change in the API, we redo the connector and send that over to Microsoft for certification. Now, what is the decision point about when things hit the API? That's outside of any of us in this conversation. That's we're not in product development, and so we don't have that insight as far as that goes. But as far as what determines when something gets in the connector, once it's released in the API, then those that control the connector then start having those conversations. Okay, when do we bundle these up and put these over into into the connector?
Glenn, I'm going to cut this question over to you. Any resources for using adaptive cards and Power Automate with AllTrue?
Not specifically, but it works the exact same way with if you take any of our trainings or what have you that talks about Razor's Edge. I know we focus a lot on Razor's Edge, but that the way it works with Power Automate and adaptive cards works the exact same way. Yes, the working and the data that comes out of AllTrue may be different, but as far as once against the Power Automate, how you create an adaptive card, how do I use the flow to work with adaptive cards, or what have you, that works the exact same way. Based on my questions, my comment earlier about the stuff in the API, I got a lot of questions going. How do we get feedback about the API? I just posted in the chat the link to the idea portal for Sky API. Sky UX and Sky API are two separate things. To Jackie, Jackie's question. So Sky UX is just a visual. The visual look and feel. I'm really boiling it down for those of you that are out there that work with this more. Don't look at me funny. Sky UX is the visual. Sky API is the API that's behind the scenes. And both Blackbaud CRM and AllTrue, they're both based on Infinity, had Sky APIs released last year. Both of them will actually have connectors for at least constituent that's out, and I believe, and please don't quote me on it, revenue's on its way. So again, Sky UX is one thing; it's a look and feel. Sky API is the API behind the scenes. However, again, and again, we already have connectors out, at least one already for AllTrue and CRM, and be able to work with that. So again, two separate items that work with two different areas, but they're both part of the Sky ecosystem.
And I'm also seeing a couple questions in here about overall API usage. If you are calling the API endpoint through the Microsoft Power Platform, you are not you do not count against the same API limits as if you're just calling those endpoints directly. So you don't need to worry about that. What you might need to worry about though is Power Automate does have its own limits in various places as to how much data you're passing through there, or how much certain actions can hold, things of that nature. So if you're running into errors like that on Power Automate, there should be, I'll throw a link to the chat here. There is just a general page from Microsoft showing what all those limits are. So you kind of really need to know like what limit you're hitting or what area, and then from there can start to work back and see how you can, potentially make that request a little bit smaller. There is also in Power Automate an Automation Center. It's a little bit of a newer feature, but if you have a flow that is running like very slowly or it keeps generating lots of errors like that, that will kind of walk you through some potential suggestions on improvements that may be relevant. But again, very specific to just the Power Automate world there, not the Blackbaud Sky API.
Yeah, and I did put, as Ashley mentioned, if you're doing things through the Power Automate, through the official Power Automate app, you're not deemed for the calls and stuff. If you're creating your own apps, maybe you're creating a custom connector or what have you, I posted in the chat, and I'll post it one more time. As far as what's should be known as far as subscription tiers that you get with your Razor's Edge, with any of your Blackbaud solution. Key thing here is that, excuse me, you may have a single call, like I asked for, I asked from the API, give me my last, give me my vendors from FENXT. That's one request. I may get 250 responses because I've got 250 vendors within Razor's Edge NXT. That counts as one call. I may be getting 250 responses back or 250 items back, but there's a single call that's out there. So again, as Ashley mentioned, if you're using the official app for Power Automate that's available in the marketplace, and you attach that, that's not counting towards your items. If you're creating your own custom connector or something, that's when things start counting. And honestly, the 25,000 calls a day, very few organizations I've seen actually hit that default limit.
And if you do hit the default, you can submit like a one-time request to have that temporarily lifted and make it higher if you know you're going to be doing something where you would be hitting that. So very, very rare though when that does happen, but there are still workarounds and ways to get around that. Jacqueline, are there any common fields that are not available in the connectors that you can name off the top of your head? Naming off the top of my head, absolutely not. It is something that I, I'm constantly kind of going back and looking at what is the field in the, in a specific action. And then if I know that field or something that I need is available in NXT, but I'm not seeing it come out of the action, that's when I go to the Sky API resources themselves and look at the endpoints available there to see if there is any kind of difference. There's not a great way to just know like, okay, these fields are not included. And that also changes. So, even though they're not included right now, there could be updates and a field would become available. So, it is constantly evolving. I would say that the best way I go about that is just knowing if I feel that there is a field that, should be included because I am seeing it in WebView or I know that data is there and I'm not seeing it in the connector action, then going to the API endpoint and looking through that documentation. And if you are using this for Razor's Edge, make sure you also look at the endpoints for the NXT data integration, because that has a list of endpoints that are not functional area specific. So you have things in there related to constituents, things related to gifts, and just other areas that are not included in those specific functional areas. So always a good idea to just double check that one as well if you're not seeing what you need in the main kind of functional area endpoint.
I've seen a couple questions come through in regard to third parties connecting and API limits and what have you. If an organization, if a third party has their app published to the marketplace and you're adding that app to your environment and you're working with data back and forth through that, if it's a marketplace published app, then you're using their API limits. If you're working with a third party that says you need to create your own app and push it to and add it manually into your environment, then it's actually working with your API limits. So again, I want to make sure that there's a difference between the two. If you're using something from the marketplace that all you have to do is click connect and it adds it to your environment, and it's from a third party, a published third party developer that has it in the marketplace, you're using their API call limits. If you have a third party that says, hey, we're going to connect, but you're going to go through and have to create your own custom app and then add that manually into your environment, that's when it's using your API limit. So as far as if there's any concerns about API limits and what that can mean, you'd actually need to go back to that third party developer, that third party service, and says, what do you mean about this? Or why is it taking so many hits or what have you? So I want to make sure that clarification, just like the fact that if you're using Power Automate and you're using our marketplace connector there, you're using Blackbaud's API limits and not yours. Same thing for there. If you've got somebody that's published on the marketplace, you're using their API limits, but they're making you create a custom app, then it's your API. So the question as far as Ultra, thank you for clarifying your question as far as the Sky add-in, Jackie. Right now, Sky add-ins are not available for embedding in Altru. The only Sky add-in that's technically available for Altru right now is what we call the full page add-in that lives kind of to the side of Altru. But as far as embedding tiles and stuff like that, like we can in Razor's Edge and Financial Edge and grant making, then the Sky add-ins for the most part are not available for Altru. So there's definitely a distinction there in regards to, yes, we got Sky APIs available for Altru and Blackbaud CRM, but for Altru, for the most part, except for the one-off as far as the full page, separate page Sky add-in, those are not available for Altru at this time. Questions about API? If you've got errors, sorry, Ashley, I think you were muted and I started talking over you. But if you've got an error with the API, and here's the thing: if you've got an error with an API, that the documentation is saying one thing, you're looking at that, and there's something, you're getting an error from that. We're talking about purely on the API side. If you got an error with that, then support is going to be the way to go. We were getting a true error from back from the API. Now I'll stop.
Yeah, thank you. That was did not realize I was on mute. Just kind of a one-off question here from Carrie Peak. Is there an easy way to pull files from the Blackbaud hosted files folder? If Power Automate the answer, is there an easy template available? Power Automate absolutely can do that very easily. It would just be, you know, a few actions in there of connecting to the, I think it's the SFTP, SSH action, and then you'll be able to link up to that files folder. I don't know that there's any templates out there that are just focused on that. There are templates where people are connecting to the files folder to pull that data out for other purposes. But you should be able to kind of link that up pretty well. And if you just try searching in the community, or maybe post a question in the community, that would be a great one to get some other feedback on if people do have maybe samples that could be shared. From Chris, although I'm already set up with Power Automate, if I want to use Power BI using the Blackbaud custom connector, is that separate? How do I do this? So I'm not a Power BI expert, so I'm going to give you kind of my view, but yes, it is separate. So, you know, Power Automate, Power BI do have separate licenses. So if you have a Power Automate license, you know, first thing is making sure you do have a Power BI license. There is documentation out there on how to set up the custom connector for Power BI. So I would say walk through that. There's also a lot of community posts out there for others where they have encountered issues that will likely be able to walk you through or get you past any kind of errors or issues that you might have setting up that connector.
Ashley, you're on mute. And just so everybody knows real quick, I released the survey, so please fill it out. Go ahead, Ashley.
Oh, no, I was answering Becky's question about how to link up different sources that they were exporting out from Q and maybe use Power Automate for those exports. I don't know if there's a template off the top of my head. I believe Rebecca has shared something out there that can do that. So I would say search around on the community for that one, see if you see it. If not, definitely post out a new question because there are some very similar resources available that are doing what you need there.
All right, guys, we're wrapping up. Please fill the survey. Thank you, Ashley, Glenn, Robert, for all of your help. I tried to pin as many of those links as possible. I think I got them all. Thank you guys for joining us today. Thank y'all.
Thank you all for coming.